I'm Julie Steele with O'Reilly Media, and I'm sitting here chatting with John Akred, who is the CTO of Silicon Valley Data Science. John, thank you for being here, and I wanted to talk about big data platforms with you. And a lot of companies, I think, at this point understand that they need a big data platform, that they can make a lot of value from their data, but actually implementing that is a whole other kettle of fish. What do you find are the challenges or the pain points?
You know, it's interesting in that if you'd asked me that question 3 years ago, I would have talked about a lot of technical challenges and the immaturity of the tool sets and the like. And while there are still aspects of the tools that are certainly bear additional maturity, it's actually the organizational and cultural issues that are really at the forefront of what I'm seeing when I'm working with clients, trying to help them introduce and expand these technologies in their organization. So, you know, for instance, I was with a client recently, and one of their senior architects said to me that information does not exist unless it's put in a schema and stored in a relational database. And, you know, thought very, like, tell the Library of Congress, right? But, you know, it's that we still need data architecture skills in the world. We still need data modeling in the world. Data modeling doesn't go away just because of schema-less data stores. But you can't take the same mindset from the technologies where those methods were developed and apply them to the new technologies, because they have a fundamentally different way of interacting with the data. And so you see that in data architecture groups, and then you also see that in data management. And you know, platforms are kind of a new thing in the enterprise, and what's more typical is there's stovepipe and siloed data applications that, or I should say data stores specific to applications. And so, you know, the data management and governance grew up in large enterprises around that model. And so when you tell a line of business owner that their cherished application data is now going to be accessible to the rest of the enterprise, that can cause some heartburn and real struggle. So it's getting as much institutional buy-in and helping a culture change and adapt to new times and technologies as much as it is applying those technologies themselves. Because fortunately, over the last few years, we've seen good examples of how people have rolled them out successfully. So we, on the technical side, have a little more to go on that.
I thought you were going to say that data doesn't exist unless it gets to the right place at the right time, which we often say is the point. Is that a cultural issue more than a technical issue also, or?
Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of talk about real-time systems these days because the technologies around memory have gotten cheaper, and there's a host of technical reasons why that's the case. There is a change in culture around becoming a data-driven decision-making organization rather than, as some of the keynotes this morning were saying, a faith-based or intuition-based approach to decision-making. And so in a sense, data doesn't invaluably inform a problem if it's not in the right place at the right time, and that probably meant some processing and improvement along the way. So designing those systems to support the decisions in the right way and matching the cadence and impedance, if you will, of those things is really, really important to realize the value of what you're building. Because, you know, a next best offers system for a call center rep who's taking customer service calls needs to get that suggested next best offer while the person's on the phone, or else it's not terribly valuable. By contrast, if you're doing monthly marketing mailings, you have a different time lag that you can deal with, and you can take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah. So you've mentioned company culture is a really important metric, or not metric, but a component in making these things happen. As somebody who sits outside of other companies trying to help them build their platforms, do you find that's easier for you to help catalyze that cultural change, or difficult, or what are the challenges?
I mean, it's a space where folks appreciate an outside objective voice. And it's interesting because there's a lot of voices coming out of the product and web properties that were the progenitors of much of this technology. And what's interesting is they don't have a whole lot to tell if, 75-year-old customer products company about enterprise data management and what the challenges of introducing these technologies is going to be, because they were in a greenfield, right? And so there's a need for a voice to help guide people that understands how these things work in the enterprise, and services companies and consulting companies like mine sit in a nice vantage point because we provide that objective voice in a conversation that's fraught with a lot of hype, a lot of hyperbole, and a lot of fear around atrophying skill sets and the like from constituencies within the organization.
So it sounds like just like with the information side of things, with the human side of things, context matters. And sometimes something coming from an objective source can make all the difference.
It really does, and it's interesting because we've worked really hard to develop a process by which companies can develop a strategy on how they're going to apply these technologies to their business problems, because ultimately that's what it's about. That is very, very participatory. We like to get as many people and constituents in the room as possible, because it's one thing to give somebody a good strategy, and if we hold that strategy constant and think about the method of generating it, the status quo is to have a few interviews and then go off into a room and write the best darn PowerPoint deck you've ever seen, right? And come back and bequeath upon the client the strategy, and the strategy is good, and woohoo! But we try to take a much more participatory approach, and basically the writing of the strategy is a formality at the end of a conversation that we've all had in a room. And now you've got a room full of advocates for that strategy that understand where it came from, why it is the way it is, and will advocate for it in the organization. And we find that to be very, very beneficial in terms of the how, getting that voice to the right people, and then giving the organization its own voice in this.
The right thing at the right time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking with us. I appreciate it.
It's been a lot of fun.